Ernst Moritz Arndt was a German nationalist, author and poet. Early in his life, he fought for the abolition of serfdom, later against Napoleonic dominance over Germany. Arndt had to flee to Sweden for some time due to his anti-French positions. He is one of the main founders of German nationalism and the 19th-century movement for German unification. After the Karlsbad decrees, the forces of the Restoration counted him as a demagogue. Arndt played an important role for the early national and liberal Burschenschaft movement and for the unification movement, and his song, Was ist das deutsche Vaterland, acted as an unofficial German national anthem. Long after his death, his anti-French propaganda was used again, in both world wars. This, together with some strongly anti-Semitic and anti-Polish statements, has led to a highly critical view of Arndt today. Early life and studies. Arndt was born at Groß-Schoritz, then in Swedish Pomerania, as the son of a prosperous farmer and emancipated serf of the lord of the district, Count Pultbus. His mother came of well-to-do German yeoman stock. In 1787 the family moved to Stralsund, where Arndt was able to attend the academy. After an interval of private study he went in 1791 to the University of Greifswald as a student of theology and history, and in 1793 moved to Jena, where he came under the influence of the German idealist philosopher Gottlieb Fichte. After the completion of his university studies he returned home, and for 2 years was a private tutor in the family of Ludwig Poschgarten, pastor of Wittau on Rügen, and having qualified for the ministry as a candidate of theology, he assisted in church services. At the age of 28 he renounced the ministry, and for 18 months led a life of traveling, visiting Austria, Hungary, Italy, France and Belgium. Turning homewards up the River Rhine, he was moved by the sight of the ruined castles along its banks to intense bitterness against France. The impressions of this journey he later described in travels in parts of Germany, Hungary, Italy and France in 1798 and 1799. Opposition to serfdom and Napoleonic rule. In 1800 he taught at the University of Greifswald as an independent lecturer in history, and the same year published Über die Freiheit der alten Republiken. In 1803 appeared Germany.Arndt und Europa, a fragmentary outburst, he himself called it, on his views on French aggression. This was followed by one of his most influential books, Geschichte der Leibeigenschaften in Pommern und Rügen, a history of serfdom in Pomerania and on Rügen, which was so convincing an indictment that King Gustav IV Adolf of Sweden in 1806 abolished serfdom. Arndt had meanwhile risen from private docent to extraordinary professor, and in 1806 was appointed to the chair of history at the university. In this year he published the first part of his Geist der Zeit, in which he flung down the gauntlet to Napoleon and called on countrymen to rise and shake off the French yoke. So great was the excitement it produced that Arndt was compelled to take refuge in Sweden to escape the vengeance of Napoleon. Settling in Stockholm, he obtained government employment, and devoted himself to the great cause which was nearest his heart. In pamphlets, poems and songs, he communicated his enthusiasm for German independence to his countrymen. Schill's heroic death at Stralsund prompted him to return to Germany, and in disguise he reached Berlin in December. In 1810 he returned to Greifswald, but only for a few months. He again set out on his adventurous travels, lived in close contact with notable men of his time, such as Gebhard Lebrecht von Blücher, August von Gneisenau and Heinrich Friedrich Karl Stein, and in 1812 was summoned by the last named to St. Petersburg to assist in the organization of the final struggle against France. Meanwhile, pamphlet after pamphlet, and his stirring patriotic songs, such as Was ist das deutsche Vaterland, Der Gott der Eisen Wachsenlies, and Was Blas and Trompeten, became widely popular when, after the peace, the University of Bonn was founded in 1818. Arndt was appointed to teach from his Geist der Zeit, in which he criticized the particularist policies of the German principalities. The boldness of his demands for reform offended the Prussian government, and in the summer in 1819 he was arrested and his papers confiscated. Although speedily liberated, he was in the following year, at the behest of the Central Commission of Investigation at Mainz, established in accordance with the reactionary Karlsbad decrees, arraigned before a special tribunal. Although not found guilty, he was forbidden to exercise the functions of his professorship, although he was allowed to retain the stipend. The next 20 years he passed in retirement and literary activity. In 1840 he was reinstated in his professorship, and in 1841 was chosen rector of the university. The revolutionary outbreak of 1848 rekindled in the venerable patriot his old hopes and energies, and he took seat as one of the deputies to the National Assembly at Frankfurt. He participated in the deputation that offered the imperial crown to Frederick William IV, and was indignant at the king's refusal to accept it, so he retired from public life. He continued to lecture and to write with freshness and vigor, and on his 90th birthday received from all parts of Germany good wishes and tokens of affection. He died at Bonn in January 1860, and was buried in Bonn's Alter Friedhof. There are monuments to his memory at Schoritz on Rügen, at the University of Greifswald, and in Bonn. Arndt was married twice, first in 1800, his wife dying in the following year, a second time in 1817. His youngest son drowned in the Rhine in 1834. Ethnocentrism, anti-Semitism. Originally a supporter of the ideas of the French Revolution, Arndt dissociated himself from them when the reign of terror of the Jacobins became apparent. When Napoleon began to conquer Europe, this renunciation was transformed into visceral dislike. Like Fichte and Jahn, Arndt began to envision the German nation as a society of ethnic homogeneity, drawing on the history of the German people, especially in the Middle Ages. His writings lack a specific political program, but instead cite external enemies. While freedom is often mentioned, the freedom Arndt envisioned was not that of a pluralistic society, but rather of a romanticized national community. The French denigrated as weakened, womanish and morally depraved, while supposed German virtues are extolled. The Germans have not been bastardized by foreign peoples, have not become half-breeds. They, more than many other peoples, have remained in the native state of purity. These ideas led on to generate anti-French propaganda during the Napoleonic conquest of the German states. When I say I hate the French carelessness, I despise the French daintiness, I disapprove of the French loquacity and flightiness. I may pronounce a flaw, but it is a flaw that I share with all my people. I could likewise say I hate the English presumption, the English prudery, the English seclusiveness. These hated, despised, dispraised characteristics are not yet vices as such. For the peoples that they represent, they may come with great virtues which I and my people are lacking. Therefore, let us hate our Frenchmen, the infamizers and destroyers of our power and virginity, even more, now that we feel how they weaken and enervate our virtue and strength. Arndt also was prejudiced against Poles and other Slavs, and published an anti-Polish pamphlet in 1831 in which he castigated Polish barbarity and wildness. During the Liberal Revolution of 1848, when the issue of reviving the Polish state was raised in Frankfurt, Arndt declared that tribes of Slavs and Wends have never done or been able to do anything lasting with respect to state, science, or art, and concluded, at the outset I assert with world history that pronounces judgment the Poles and the whole Slavonic tribe are inferior to Germans. He also warned of close contact with Judaism. He warned of the thousands which by the Russian tyranny will now come upon us, even more abounding from Poland, the impure flood from the east. Moreover, he warned of a Jewish intellectual conspiracy, claiming that Jews had usurped half of literature. Arndt paired his anti-Semitism with his anti-French views, calling the French the Jewish people, or refined bad Jews. In 1815 he wrote of the French Jews, I call them again, not only for the Jewish lists and the penny-pinching avarice, but even more because of the Jew-like sticking together. Works. See also German wiki source. Poems and songs. Arndt's lyric poems are not all confined to politics. Many among the Gedichte are religious pieces. This is a selection of his best-known poems and songs. Sind wir vereint, zur Gartenstund. Was ist das Deutschen Vaterland? What is the German's fatherland? English-German Classics 1900. William Cleaver Wilkinson. Der Gott der Eisen wachsen ließ. Melody written by Albert Methfessel. Zu den Waffen. KOMMT her IHR side geladen, EG 213. Ich weiß woran ich glaube. Die Leipziger Schlacht. Other works. Ries durch Schweden. Nebenstaden, Beschreibung und Geschichte der Shetlandischen Inseln und Orkaden. Die Freude über die Niederland. Erinnerungen aus dem äußeren Leben, an autobiography, and the most valuable source of information for Arndt's life. This is the basis of E.M. Seeley's life and adventures of E.M. Arndt. Rein und Errungen, mein Wanderungen und Wandlungen mit dem Reichsfreien Heinrich Karl Friedrich vom Stein. Pro Populo Germanico, originally intended to form the fifth part of the Geist der Zeit. Biographies. Schenkel, E. Langenberg, Wilhelm Bohr, H. Meisner and Argerds, E.M. Arndt, ein Lebensbild in Briefen. A. Thiele, E.M. Arndt.